human rights. So now let's get into why these youth are suffering from poor mental health. At the surface, I found that there was a stigma within minority communities, a lack of funding, and various stressors that poverty itself brings. I decided to focus on diving deeper into a lack of funding because it's easier to tackle than stigma or poverty. So why is there a lack of funding? Well, it's because this funding is limited in the first place, and mental health is extremely expensive to fund. And one reason is that there's a severe shortage of mental health professionals. So let's get into this lack of access and shortage in Texas. In Texas, 67% of youth with depression receive no mental health treatment, and only 25% with severe depression receive consistent care. In fact, Texas ranks 50 out of 51 in terms of access to care, with an 880 to 1 ratio of people to mental health workers. So originally, I was planning to focus on mental health awareness, but these alarming statistics confirm my decision to focus on access to care instead. So when interviewing students, I came across a few key insights. Students stated that they were feeling increased feelings of isolation because of the virtual format COVID-19 has made normal, and they also felt anxious about this uncertainty. Then students were scared to voice these feelings to parents and other adults because they felt they could not understand what they were going through. And these insights and research led me to the gaps in the current solutions within this space. The first gap is that currently these solutions that exist are focused on healing after these issues have already developed. Second, they focus on adult support, which brings into the problem generational communication barriers. And third, they're based on therapy and mental health care, which is often high and unaffordable. So therefore, these students need solutions that are low cost, focused on prevention and peer support. So that's where my solution comes into play. In Touch is a low-cost, preventative, peer support-based matching platform for high school students in Dallas ISD. So now I'm going to briefly go through backwards mapping, which I found helpful in validating my idea. My long-term goal is to lower rates of depression and anxiety so students feel better supported and less stressed. So how does this happen? Students need more access to support and guidance resources. And how do they get this support? Well, there needs to be an increased emphasis on this initiative so funding can be directed towards it. But what has to change in order for these programs to get funding? Well, we need to provide increased awareness of the importance of this issue so there can be longer-term policy changes. And finally, what has to change for these policy changes to occur? Well, there needs to be an initial cost-effective solution that spreads awareness and has proven positive outcomes that makes it easier to push for these policy changes, which is where In Touch comes in. The basic way it works is by first gathering a base of peer mentors that have had different experiences with mental health themselves during high school. Then students are told to answer questions anonymously about their own experiences and background. And then In Touch works to match these students with a peer mentor. It's unique and targeted for 3 main reasons. 1, it works to eliminate a communication barrier that exists between adults and current students. And 2, it focuses on prevention because before these issues develop and having a support system, not just post-trauma healing. And 3rd, the system of matching ensures greater empathy and not just sympathy between these peers and these students. So after developing this, I asked a teacher at one of these schools, my mental health supervisor from this past summer, and a student I previously interviewed, all of whom stated various things about how they thought it was a good idea from their own personal experiences, either dealing with seeing these mental health issues or what they think it could help with them in the future. So I guess to wrap up, I know that when I was going through my rough time in high school, I would have benefited from having this support system and knowing that someone was there for me who understood what I felt. And this isolation and depression that I felt is something I hope that In Touch works to remedy little by little. So thank you so much for listening to my research today, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you so much, Veronica. I would love to hear some questions from the audience, so I'll open it up to everyone else.
I also can't see actually, let me see if I can try to see the chat. 1 second.
If you can't see the chat, that's okay. I can I can read the questions, okay. But I actually
found a way to pull it up. So if people want to chat it, I'm also good with seeing that now.
Great. I actually have a question. So on this peer-to-peer matching, I'm interested to see how you expect to manage the logistics of this. So looking at it, is it one-to-one? Is it one in a group? And how are you planning on creating a space where students feel comfortable talking about their mental health with a potential stranger?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that I want to further explore, like as I keep developing this idea. But I think initially, what I was planning to do is just like a one-to-one system, and like it wasn't going to be anonymous. And then I actually got feedback that students feel more comfortable talking to these strangers, I guess like talking about their personal lives if you do make it anonymous, because oftentimes like if a student knows that my name is going to be out there, they won't want to. So the first, I guess, change I made to my idea from that was just like the anonymity that I talked about, which like is how students would feel more comfortable with strangers. And I think like in terms of just like the group versus one-to-one, I think that is like very subjective in terms of situations. So if I feel like a student would like have better empathy with someone else who maybe already has another mentor, then I would be fine like adding another student with that mentor. But it's just like very matching dependent and like similar experience driven rather than just like a strict one-to-one or one-to-group ratio.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If we have any more questions, feel free to send them in the chat, but we are running up on time. So if not, we can go ahead and move on to Catherine and Dominic. Thank you so much, Veronica.
Okay.
It was incredible. I wish I could like actually applaud. But Kat, Dom, you can go ahead and get everything set up, and at 6:20 we can begin. Great. And it looks like we are right on time. Ready when you are.
Hi everyone, my name is Catherine Dominic, and today I present to you Capsule, a venture focused on Syrian medical delivery, specifically due to the Syrian civil war. So why Syria, why medical delivery? And I want to start off by mentioning my great uncle. He was a war doctor in Iran, and he would tell me a common war strategy was to take out the doctor because of their ability to heal, and in turn, soldiers would follow. And he told me the story about how a shooter was aiming at his head, and just as the bullet was about to hit him, a soldier had stepped in his path and took the bullet for him. This goes to show the vast differences of being a doctor in a climate that is very politically tumultuous versus being a doctor in a country like the United States. The duration of the Syrian civil war has gone on for far too long, almost nearing a decade now, and this has been a political issue that's always been in the front of my mind. And as an aerospace engineering student here at UT, the intersection of medical delivery and drones has always been fascinating to me. So what exactly is going on? Let's gain some perspective and step into the shoes of a Syrian doctor or frontline worker. So the Syrian regime is sending airstrikes and air raids towards rebel-controlled territory within Syria in hopes to get the territory back. Infrastructure is then destroyed, and it's physically impossible to go from point A to B. So we're talking about destroyed hospitals, destroyed buildings, destroyed roads. And so doctors are operating out of abandoned homes and buildings known as makeshift hospitals. And because the Syrian conflict is constantly evolving, doctors are forced to move from makeshift hospital to makeshift hospital. And therefore they are leaving medical supplies behind, therefore widening the gap of having deficient medical supplies. So the frontline workers that do have the capability to deliver supplies are targeted by the Syrian regime, making these medical missions very risky. So the problem is, how might we address the lack of safe medical delivery options affecting Syrian doctors and frontline workers from providing treatment to their patients without endangering their lives when retrieving medical supplies? So Capsule is a venture focused on introducing the humanitarian drone infrastructure within Syria to help frontline workers and doctors obtain medical supplies for Syrian civilians by minimizing human contact in the high-threat environment of the Syrian civil war. So the mission is to have the safety of transportation personnel, such as pilots, drivers, and front field workers, to be protected as they're moving further away from the Syrian war front, and instead are trained to operate these medical delivery drone systems. So the Syrian healthcare system is at an all-time low, especially due to COVID, and we're trying to improve it in this area. So how can we ensure that Capsule is successful? First, the percentage of preventable deaths from lack of supplies will go down, and nonprofits are able to avoid working with corrupt Syrian regime partners. The most important metric of success, however, is that the percentage of injured doctors and frontline workers goes down. So I reached out to beneficiaries and stakeholders to get feedback for my idea. And the first organization I reached out to was We Robotics. And they're responsible for creating humanitarian impact by offering robotic services to local ecosystems. And they have an office in Syria. One of the most important things they told me was focusing on community engagement. And they said community perception of drones was very crucial. Unfortunately, due to years of airstrikes and air raids, Syrian civilians have a negative perception of drones. And so the first couple years of Capsule would be focused on changing this perspective. The next stakeholder I reached out to was the HR manager at the Syrian American Medical Society. And this was extremely insightful because he told me all about the political nuances and local labor laws I would have to abide by if I wanted to implement a medical delivery system in Syria. One of the most important beneficiary interviews I had was with Jewish World Watch. And they employ this tactic called guerrilla humanitarianism, where they send out their truck drivers to go on medical missions to get medical supplies. Unfortunately, they have a high percentage of injured truck drivers, and they said they would greatly benefit from something like Capsule. So the Syrian civil war is a multifaceted issue, and the chaos of warfare is both international and intranational. Even though there is a set of global humanitarian laws, the Syrian government has committed countless war crimes, and permission to utilize the Syrian airspace for humanitarian aid can't be guaranteed. Before researching about the Syrian war, I assumed that the conflict was between a few rebel groups and the Syrian government, but I was shocked to see that there are over 2,000 rebel groups, and conflict occurs within these rebel groups, between these rebel groups, with the Syrian regime, and against other foreign powers. So the xenophobia is at an all-time high, and conflict reducing isn't going to happen anytime soon. Like I said earlier, the Syrian healthcare system is at its lowest point due to COVID-19. Unfortunately, a third of cases occur or affect the Syrian doctors and frontline workers, so a solution should be found as quick as possible. So the question is, are drones feasible in Syria? Not quite. The political situation in Syria is unfortunately so convoluted, but it is perfect for when regions of Syria are liberated. So we're talking about post-Syrian civil war, when the infrastructure is at its lowest point, but there is not as much political conflict. So what can Capsule do now? There are many parts of the world where drones could be implemented, not because of political conflict, but because of natural disasters, such as the wildfires in California or the hurricanes that are affecting Central America. We can use these countries as a case study to build trust and legitimacy with Syrian stakeholders so that Capsule is ready for a Syria post-Syrian civil war. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Great job, Kat. Yes, I would love to hear some questions from the audience if anyone has any. Yeah, I love seeing the love in the chat.
So, can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Kat, hi.
Hello. Thank you for coming.
You bet. I wouldn't miss this. So, where does the passion come from? Why did you choose this direction for not just this? That I know you're doing this for Cell, but you're doing this for a lot more as well. So, where did this come from?
So I'm an aerospace engineering major here at UT, and I think when coming into college, I wanted to pursue aerospace because I was definitely interested in NASA missions and airplanes. But then I realized that I wanted to tie in a social aspect to aerospace. And I definitely see that in humanitarian drones. And I know this is one aspect of delivering goods and delivering medical supplies, but there's such a vast variety of applications drones have. I remember seeing that drones can be used to help map out roadways in cities of poor infrastructure. And I just really want to continue with this and in my future career, always find a way to tie in social impact with aerospace.
Snaps for that.
Great
Does anyone-
answer. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Mitch Jacobson. I'm the director of the executive director of the Blackstone Launchpad on campus. So Sal used to have sort of a permanent home at the Blackstone Launchpad physically.
We
And
really miss it.
so we miss you guys. And I hope you all are doing very well in this crazy time of our lives, a time you will never forget. But I've been working with Kat for this semester on this project, so I decided to show up and see how she did. She did great, of course.
Thank you so much, Mitch. It's always great to see you.
You bet. You bet. You guys are great. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank
Good
you.
job, Kat.
Kat, I have a quick question, unless anyone else has one first. Okay. My question is that you mentioned changing perspectives on drones, especially because of the situation in Syria right now. What are your kind of thoughts on how you would change those perspectives? Because that feels like a big goal.
Yes, for sure. So with We Robotics, they offer a training program or to help with community engagement. So that would mean the first thing, I can't go directly to civilians, of course. I would have to work with nonprofits, and then they would have community outreach and community engagement with drones. So the thing is, since we can't operate with drones during the Civil War, that could be a good thing, because post-Civil War, they won't see as many airstrikes and air raids. So that takes out the negative perceptions already. So it's a slow process, but eventually we will get there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And now we can move on to Adi. So Aditya, super excited to hear your presentation. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. All right, my name is Aditya, and my social venture is Dietetique, a K-12 nutritional education venture. You're in the school cafeteria. You look down as your plate fills up. Apples, juice, and a mystery meat. Gross. You know that you're supposed to eat these foods, but nobody ever really told you why. Questions like these about summed up my K-12 nutritional education. We've never had more information, but when it comes to nutritional information, there's often a famine in our public schools. According to the CDC, US students receive less than 8 hours of nutritional education per year, but they need over 30 hours for actual developmental change. On the other hand, diet plays a key role in the development of chronic disease, which makes it so incredibly important. Pearland ISD has little to no nutritional education for its K-12 students. What's really behind this? Well, to find out, I talked to nutritional experts, Mrs. Ann Shetler, the Pearland ISD dietitian, and Dr. Jamie Davis, the professor of nutritional sciences and the leader of an NIH study called Texas Sprouts. I also had interviews with DOS Pearland ISD students. So to talk to the expert interviewers, Mrs. Shetler confirmed that there's little to no nutritional education in Pearland ISD. For the most part, nutrition is left to PE teachers. Dr. Davis also confirmed that for the most part, Texas has very few state regulations on nutrition. Nutritional education is left to the districts. She also said that nutritional education is best started early for elementary school students. Her project, Texas Sprouts, focused on gardening as an effective means, but this is a very difficult solution to put into place in light of the pandemic when many students are only remote learners. To look at the root cause, on the surface, it seems that there is a lack of prioritization. Dietetics education is not prioritized by PE teachers who are charged with teaching it. Furthermore, there's an issue of class time. Science teachers do not have the time to add nutritional education to their curriculums. There seems to be an underlying apathy, which Mrs. Shetler confirmed. In fact, Pearland ISD administration actively bars her from expanding menus and curriculum decisions. According to Dr. Davis, this all comes down to funding. There is insufficient funding for a full-fledged dietetics program as implemented in Fort Bend ISD. When I talked to the beneficiaries, overall, they recollected no nutritional education from Pearland ISD outside of PE classes. Furthermore, they all felt that nutritional education in Pearland ISD is not substantive. Finally, they said that they relied on their parents or their own Google searches for nutritional education. As Arushi Laki noted, elementary school education did no more than mention vague ideas such as the food pyramid or manage your diet. So when to develop a solution to this problem, I thought about three things. First of all, Duolingo, a module-based interactive learning platform for language learners. Second of all, I thought back to mental consulting with matching apps that match students with mental health specialists. Finally, I thought about the online learning platforms that Pearland ISD has put into place. In light of the pandemic, Pearland has strived to ensure that all students have access to devices and the internet. My solution was Dietetique, an app-based nutritional platform for K-12 students. So what is Dietetique? First of all, this platform can connect students with dietitians to provide personalized, culturally relevant nutritional care. It's incredibly important that nutritional dietetics information be culturally relevant because, as Ashwin Murali, one of my beneficiaries, said, he did not have any education on dietetics, even in relation to his vegetarianism. Whenever he asked questions, he was always directed to meat products, and people didn't really know how to respond to protein-based diets, so that were not based on meat. Second of all, dietetics can provide, second of all, nutrition education modules that Pearland ISD teachers can easily integrate into their curriculums. And finally, interactive nutrition games that students can use to learn about their diet. When I went back to my beneficiaries, they had a lot of feedback from me. All the interviewed students felt that an app linking students with nutritional modules, dietitians, and games would be useful in an educational setting. However, they had three concerns. First of all, they felt that the app must be easily accessible for all students. Since Pearland ISD has worked to make sure that internet access and technology access is better in light of the pandemic, since many of its students are online, this concern can be met through that. They also felt that the app must be adequately incentivized. This is a very difficult concern because it's very difficult to reach high school students and middle school students who may feel that they don't really want to participate in the app or may just throw it off as another requirement that the school is putting on them. However, the third concern helps address the second concern, because if the app caters to a younger demographic, it's actually better because it can help form those early eating habits. And a younger demographic is more likely to be open-minded to new fruits and new ideas. It's not just about diet. Students on free and reduced lunches and lower income immigrant communities have less access to diverse dietary choices. In Pearland ISD, 25% of the students are Asian, and many of them are Hindu and Jain and have vegetarian diets, which there's very little education on. Furthermore, obesity and related metabolic disorders disproportionately impact students of color. Furthermore, poor dietary habits are linked with higher rates of chronic diseases like obesity, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and cancers. Dietetique is one step forward towards making a change in nutritional education in Pearland ISD.
Thank you, Aditya. You guys are doing so good at getting the 7-minute mark. I'm now happy to open it up for questions.
Hey Aditya, loved your presentation. The deck was beautiful. All of the decks have been beautiful, but yours was beautiful too. So I wanted to ask, why did you decide to make your beneficiary age range for your venture K through 12 and not like younger, focusing on maybe like K through 5?
Right. So I did talk to Dr. Davis about this, and as she said, it is better to target a younger demographic like elementary school students. But the fact of the matter is that at any age, people can make changes in their diets. Even if it's harder as you grow older, there is still room at any point you can make a change. And it really comes down to the number of hours in the curriculum. 8 hours is the average for US as a whole, whereas we need over 30 hours of instruction. Even if that's started at a later age, it can still have a significant impact 40 years from now or 50 years from now for the students.
Thank you.
I have another question. Also love the presentation. It was so lovely, so beautiful. So your idea involves an app, and maybe you mentioned this and I missed it, but like, would this be like allowed for like students that are like younger that like might not have access to like that device? Or like, I know like I didn't get my first phone till late, and would it be like for districts that, or does Pearland like provide like iPads or some sort of like access to apps for the students?
So the pandemic, if anything, has helped us because so many students as young as the kindergarten are doing school online. The school is providing them access to iPads or computers that they can work on. And as far as it being allowed, it would be allowed because it's a district level decision to do something like that. So as far as legal concerns go, that's on the.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. Great work. I'm like just getting so excited for everyone here. So I'm just like off the wall right now. So thank you so much, Aditya. And next up, we're going to have Alyssa Lee. So.
All right, everybody. So I want to first start by asking a question. What does it take for a minor to get medically prescribed birth control? Possibly a good relationship with their parents, the ones they actually have to ask for it, a stable family income, maybe even an older sister who did the tough talk already, paved the way, and they already have birth control. But what if I told you that I had all 6 of these conditions perfectly? I am from Sugar Land, Texas, a suburban city that has plentiful access to healthcare. The family median income here is over $100,000. I actually have 2 sisters, both on birth control before me, and a great relationship with my dad who, and this is not on the screen, he's actually a practicing gynecologist. So I checked all the boxes. I met all these theoretically perfect conditions, and yet I still struggled to ask for birth control when I became sexually active. And so this led me to wonder, what does this look like for other girls? Other girls like me, other girls who maybe don't check off all the boxes. What does it look like for them? Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Lee, and for my cell venture, I wanted to research minors' access to reproductive care, more specifically, medically prescribed birth control. And so my main form of research was beneficiary interviews. I was looking specifically at sexually active females, ages 14 to 17, living in Fort Bend County. And after interviewing them, the major theme I saw was, I don't want to tell my parents I'm having sex, which not very surprising, but what is super surprising is similar to my experience. Most of my beneficiaries felt it didn't matter what their relationship was with their parents. I had talked to a girl that said, I am so close with my parents and I feel 100% comfortable talking about sex with them. I just can't tell them that I'm sexually active until my mid to late 20s. And so the problem here is they're already writing off they're already accepting defeat to accessing birth control as a minor, right? Their plans are, I'm gonna wait till I'm 18, or worse, I'm gonna wait till I'm off my parents' insurance. And this is dangerous because during this wait time till they're 18, off their parents' insurance, they're not having safe sex. And so I wanted to ask the question, how might we address parents as a barrier to professional reproductive care affecting my beneficiaries from achieving successful access to medically prescribed birth control? And a great place to start would be, why is it so difficult for minors to independently access birth control in the first place? And reason number 1, there's just a lack of methods for them to do so. So under Texas laws, there are very limited circumstances when it comes to which minors can actually consent to treatment by a licensed physician or a doctor. They could be on the armed services, they could be emancipated or married, but my beneficiaries aren't really falling under any of that criteria. As for legal loopholes, though some exist, many physicians aren't comfortable putting themselves in a position that could risk malpractice. So here's a direct quote from the office administrator at Sugarland OB-GYN. My goal is to protect my physicians. I don't let my doctors get close to seeing minors without their parents physically present. So aside from the lack of methods allowing minors to access birth control, what else makes it so difficult? Minors are uneducated about their options. And this could be in part because they don't want to do the research, they don't want to take the time to do the research. But more often than not, what we're seeing is that the information is not easily accessible for minors. So what does that mean? Aren't we in the digital era? Isn't the internet like at our fingertips? How is this not easily accessible? For one, minors don't know what to look for, what questions they're trying to ask. Information is not consolidated into one place. Even when doing my research, I'm checking multiple resources, multiple organizations. And lastly, the information on the internet is not catered to minors. And so we have a problem here. The people who need access don't understand how to get it. And so now they're having unsafe sex. So now that we understand why it's so difficult for minors to independently access birth control, what can we do to solve this? And today I'm super excited to introduce to you guys HerSpace, the one-stop site for all your medically prescribed birth control concerns. HerSpace aims to provide minors with accurate, consolidated, and personalized information in their journey to receiving birth control. And HerSpace is going to come with 3 main features. So firstly, we have a journey map. A journey map would be a step-by-step guide as to how to achieve birth control. And it would have all of the options, not across multiple websites, but on one single page. The information would be consolidated. What they need to do would be clearly listed out, making no questions asked in this process. Number 2, we have a health professional chat line. So this would be a confidential and convenient way for minors to get personalized, accurate information regarding their health. This also does a really important job of bridging the gap between minors and health professionals in the first place. And the last step, we want to partner with Title X telehealth clinics. So Title 10 clinics are federally funded clinics that don't have to follow all the rules of state funded and private practices. Okay, so this is the only legal way for minors to actually receive birth control confidentially. So we want to capitalize on it by making it accessible, using HerSpace as a pipeline to get these people to reach telehealth clinics where they can be prescribed birth control over the phone from the comfort of their house. And so similar to organizations like Jane's Due Process, we're making the only available method of getting birth control for minors more convenient and more accessible. The best part of this all, the beneficiaries love it. Not only do they think the information is accessible and convenient for them to access, but this is actually something they have said several times they would use. So why is this important? Why does this solution matter? Of course, we want to prevent unintended pregnancies, but there's more than that. We want to make birth control a priority. A beneficiary told me, because birth control is not an option, it's not a priority. And that is not the message that we could be enforcing. We need to have a higher standard of safe sex among minors. And by contributing to the normalization of birth control, as well as making it more accessible to minors, we are taking a huge step in that direction. Not only that, access to birth control is not just about healthcare. This is a human rights issue. This is about getting women empowered about having control over their sexual health, doing what they can in their ability to take care of their bodies. This is about education. Minors deserve access to the full scope of sex ed. That includes birth control, and that includes how to get birth control. And lastly, but definitely not least, this is about economic inequality. By allowing women to control when they are childbearing, you are allowing them improve socioeconomic status, more opportunities to higher education, more qualified professions. And with that, I ask again, what does it take for a minor to get medically prescribed birth control? And my answer for you is HerSpace. Thank you. I'm open to any questions.
Alyssa, that was so incredible. I love your energy. Really iconic always. Wonderful. And another incredible slide deck from our fellows. I'm super excited to open it up for questions. And the chat's going wild.
Okay, yeah, I did have a question. I absolutely love this idea. I think it would be so beneficial. I was also wondering if HerSpace would include information about how birth control can be used to treat a lot of other issues and not just protecting against safe sex, because I think that knowledge is like a lot of people don't realize that it's not just something to be used to protect against sex. So I wanted to know if like you guys would touch on that and how important that can be for a lot of women.
Definitely. We want to include like just a lot of accurate information on the site because my main beneficiaries are sexually active minors who are looking for birth control for safe sex. That would definitely be the priority of the website. But of course, even with the chat helpline connecting minors to health professionals, that's definitely all information that they would be volunteering and letting them know about. But again, just to specifically satisfy the needs of the beneficiaries, I think promoting it for safe sex is the main idea.
Thank you. If we have one quick question, we can answer that. But if not, then we can move on. All right. I love that we're like perfectly on time right now. So next up, we're going to have Ayomide. And thank you again, Alyssa, for that incredible presentation.
So hello everyone, I'm happy to be talking to you guys today about mental health and its role in the African diaspora community in America. So to give an overview of the problem, I want to draw on my experience as a member of this diaspora community. So in high school, my younger brother and even now faces academic issues and requires academic accommodations. And because of my role as an immigrant, I wish to help him achieve his goals in reaching college. So I committed myself to tutoring him every single day for 5 years and even now. So throughout those 5 years and even now, I've realized that life is truly about striking a balance because I realized that I face many internal and external expectations that come with the immigrant community, such as the expectation to be more of a perfectionist, for instance, and to achieve what your parents worked hard to come to the US for. So I've learned that because of mental health stigmas in the community, I've faced mental health suppressions because I've even suppressed my own emotions because I felt like they're not relevant enough. And I believe that this has led to anxiety panics in my life. And I've seen that with my friends and other beneficiaries I interviewed, this was a common experience. So I found data that says that ignoring early risk factors can delay the treatment process by 10 years. And as you can see on the next slide, in my beneficiary interviews, 63% of them said they took a passive approach to their mental health. And what that means is they're more passive about getting mental health help or solving risk factors and getting treatments. And 37% take a more active approach and are more active about getting treatment. However, it is interesting to note that all the 37% are college students. And this is important because I interviewed a wide range of ages, from teenagers in high school to people who have graduated from UT. So this signifies the delay in mental health treatment because these issues typically start in middle school. So just to give a quote, one example of a quote that I had from a beneficiary interview: as an immigrant, you need to have that one person in your life who's there to provide you with emotional support when you need it, because there are different types of support that you need. And when it really comes down to it, it really helps to have someone who can actively listen and can empathize with you. In addition, I also mentioned here toxic masculinity, and another beneficiary opened up to me and said that because of toxic masculinity and the pressures on him to essentially be a perfectionist in college even, he's faced testing anxiety, and in his freshman year, he failed almost every single test that he took. Another beneficiary I interviewed said that because of Nigeria's misogynistic culture, even though she's in America, she has faced the reality that that's changed her values and how she is in, for example, social groups, because she typically takes more of a mom role. And what happens is she essentially can't stop momming and can't really take the time to look out for her own health or ask for help or reach out. So she has told me that she's faced multiple panic attacks and can never reach out to anyone to get assistance. And to give a quick summary of current gaps, even though support from family and friends is helpful, it's regardless undermined by stigma because of all of our roles in the immigrant diaspora community and how that's a big issue in the diaspora. And professional help has been found to be culturally incompetent and to be expensive. And in addition, religious groups are truly undermined by stigma because, for instance, what is happening with religious groups is essentially they try to shrug away any mental issues or any mental risk factors that may arise in individuals who call for help. And public policy has shown that because of bureaucracy, implementation of anything to help these beneficiary groups is slow. So I did a root cause analysis and I focused on emotional suppression, but I did consider parental adolescent conflicts and cultural conflicts. I felt that emotional suppression was the most important issue to tackle, as I said, because of how many immigrants in the diaspora community face it because of stigma. So as you can see, that leads to a delay in receiving help because professionals lack a cultural competency and because of the stigma that I mentioned here. And all this is because of internal and external pressures about, for instance, how to act truly. So how can we solve these issues? And my social venture Mentally is a cheap, effective, and digital music therapy service that uses AI and an adaptive approach to mental health. So Mentally, as I said, is for African immigrant teenagers who are in middle school, high school, even college, who have early risk factors so that we can curb those risk factors and identify quick and healthy treatment. So it features lyrical analysis, analysis of the lyrics of a song, musical improv, either individually or in a group, and adaptive music choices, as I said, through AI, and basic songwriting is also used, and all these are used tangentially to, also reveal one's emotions. So just to prove that music therapy works, I found a statistical analysis of 9,617 music therapy patients, and it's been found to reduce stress. And thus, tangentially, in association, it also reduces mental health risk factors related to anxiety and depression, for example. So from beneficiary feedback that I gathered using the mom test, which is essentially being more open-ended about my approach to see what the beneficiary uses and reduce bias, I found that Mentally needs to increase cultural integration to adhere to these beneficiary groups. And how Mentally aims to do that is essentially through the adaptive approach and letting the clients write their own lyrics. And in addition, we need to increase gamification. And what that is using game strategies to essentially keep people hooked on the app, for instance. And how this manifests itself is by incorporating itself and Mentally into one's daily routine and lifestyle. For instance, when they have social events. So by 2026, the global music therapy market size is projected to be $5.1 billion. And because of that opportunity, the goals that I have are to essentially increase Mentally's cloud infrastructure and develop that, and also create an MVP and proof of concept and increase gamification through AI, as I said, because this is an important issue that needs to be tackled because it's underrepresented and it needs to be tackled for all. So thank you for listening to my presentation. And do you guys have any questions?
Thank you so much, Ayomide. Yeah, super excited to open it up for questions. I love how much you guys love each other in the chat. It makes me so happy. Yeah, I love the name, by the way, Ayomide. Very creative. I have a question. So I would love to hear a little bit about your next steps, like what your like kind of immediate step is post SYS and how you plan
Okay.
to kind of scale this.
One thing I actually didn't mention is Mentory's revenue model, actually. So Mentory's revenue model is aimed to be B2B, and that's by partnering with organizations such as schools and companies and using a subscription-based model, essentially, because those organizations can afford it. And for individuals, Mentory will operate through ad revenue and also be freemium, if you get what I'm saying. So essentially, you'll have some premium features associated with it. So immediately right now, I aim to develop an MVP in the form of a basic app and test out music therapy and its effects. And in addition, before each session and after every session, Mentally will also display a survey that uses quantifiable measures to see an outcome on mental health and look at the changes associated with that and any stresses that the client may be essentially associated with.
Great answer. Wow. Okay. I definitely put a lot of effort into thinking about finances too. So incredible. We are out of time for your slot. So we can go ahead and move on to the next presenter, who is Lucky. So thank you again, Ayomide. Great job. And Lucky, you can go ahead and share your screen and get started.
Awesome. Wait, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi guys, my name's Lucky. Thanks for joining me today. We'll be talking about my product, Gila, and how it can be used to increase confidence when expressing concern. So it all started last semester when I took an intro to sociology class with Dr. Reese, pictured here. And one thing that I remember from that class is that he told us that Black women older than 30 were 4 to 5 times higher to die during childbirth than white women. And as somebody who kind of wants to go into healthcare herself, this was just, a startling fact. And I just kind of reconsidered everything I knew about the healthcare system and questioned why this was happening. So I did some research and several reasons popped up. One of them was inherent racism. Is it a physician's side fault in the way that they think? Maybe it's the medical institution. Are the materials outdated, or are they also subject to racial bias? Was it intimidation? Are doctors kind of seen as unfriendly and unquestionable? Was it a cultural barrier? Or maybe it was articulation. Did people just not know how to ask the right questions? And lastly, maybe it was a physical constraint. Were Black patients not provided enough time to receive adequate care? So with all of these options, I knew the next thing I had to do was find people to talk to. So I reached out to Facebook groups, I contacted acquaintances, shout out to Sean for introducing me to 2 amazing women. And I also talked to people in my neighborhood. Now, this was a really important step because I'm not part of the community myself. And so it's really important to talk to people who were part of the community to better understand their experiences. So I was really fortunate to have the opportunity to do that. All right, so among all the people I talked to, something I found really interesting was every single one was refused a test they wanted. And they had to ask or push, several times to get the test that they wanted, whether it was for blood clotting or STDs, which, is kind of ridiculous. And whether they received the test or they didn't, they always lacked explanations from the doctors. They used complicated terms, or they were fed, excessive information or given pamphlets. And one thing that always popped up when they were explaining is that they were hesitant to ask questions. Now, I found that really interesting because as a patient, you're kind of entitled to that, right? Aren't you? And so from that, I formed my first problem statement. How can we help Black women ages 20 to 60 feel more comfortable expressing concerns in the physician's office? So here's a quote that kind of sums up the problem pretty well. Historically, Black women have been taught that to see a physician, they tell you something and you just do it, you don't ask questions. So I did some further research, I read some articles, I looked into those Facebook groups, I talked to people, as I told you before, and these are some common themes that kept popping up. One is that Black women don't want to be stereotyped as aggressive if they ask too many questions or talk too much. they're not sure exactly what questions to ask, which, you know, is expected because medical terminology is not the easiest to understand. They wish somebody was in the room with them. And when they do want to ask questions, more often than not, they seek counsel from people in their community or relatives. And the physicians who contributed to these articles would always express the need for Black women to be more assertive. So I took all of these insights together and I formed Gila. Now, Gila is a multifaceted app that kind of tackles this issue in many ways. First is question templates. It provides you a way to a starting point to ask questions about what you want to find out. It also connects you to reputable resources. People, when they panic, they often Google things and are led down the wrong path, which can cause kind of harsh consequences if you're given misinformation. It provides you consolidated forums, so places to talk with women who have experienced exactly what you have. And finally, it connects you with secondary opinions with doctors who are also people of color. So here's a sample interface, you know, pretty basic. On the left, you sign in, and on the right, there's like chat boxes. If you see on the bottom, there's an example of a question template. What are the top 3 complaints you hear about this treatment? Pretty straightforward. So I showed this to my beneficiaries. They liked that it was all consolidated. They liked that they had the opportunity to connect with others. They liked that they were getting a second opinion, and they wanted to find, you know, Black-owned clinics, and they felt it could be more personalized. So maybe things like being able to track your own medical history or your lab reports. And they also wanted it to be connected to social media, all of which I thought were excellent ideas, and I'm planning to incorporate them into my next iteration. All right. So now for revenue, I'm planning on kind of getting revenue from advertisements in the app or making the user subscription based. Now, not for, maybe for things like getting second opinions, which can be a lot more costly, you would have to pay, but I don't expect them to pay for basic services. And maybe also partnering with clinics or the government to raise some revenue. So how does this compare to existing solutions? So there's another app called HerHue, and it connects people of color that are patients with people of color that are doctors. Unfortunately, it doesn't have forums or any of the other features I discussed. Another thing commonly used is Facebook, which I'm sure y'all know. The healthcare, the chat itself is not in an app format, the page, and it doesn't connect people with people of color doctors. But it does provide a forum for community discussion. So Gila, whose name I want to explain, but I don't have enough time, it has all 3 aspects, which is really its strong point, that it's holistic and consolidated. So how does this connect to other issues? First of all, education. Women should be informed about their body and the medical practices that are being done on them and the ones they need. Second, mental health. It's very closely related to physical well-being. Black communities face disproportionately mental health issues such as depression and anxiety and stress, which also contribute to their physical health. And lastly, generational well-being. Increasing confidence in women will allow for generations to find security in their health. When parents experience something they don't find favorable, they usually don't encourage it among their children, right? So if this app provides a positive experience, then people in the family will not be discouraged to find the help they need. All right, so thank y'all for listening. I know I talk kind of fast. Open for questions.
Great job.
I've got a quick one. Could you, oh yeah, really good job. Super impressed, and I've been impressed with everyone so far. But could you explain what Gila means?
Right, so Gila is kind of based off of Henrietta Lacks. So Henrietta Lacks was an African-American woman whose cells were immortal. So she had cancer cells, and her cells were taken from her without her consent. And so what's really interesting is that her cells have created almost 90% of the vaccines we have today, and they're still they're still reproduced today. So like the polio vaccine, things like that. And it's very notable because as a Black woman, her cells were kind of taken from her without consent. And it kind of just speaks to the history Black women have experienced, where they've been kind of experimented on, they've been subjected to racism, and rather than treated as humans, they've been treated as like subjects or patients. So I think naming the app after her is kind of a form of like tribute to her contribution.
I love that. Yeah, thank you for explaining.
Oh, great question, Brooke. I was gonna ask about the name too. We have time for one more question if anyone wants to ask.
I have one, Lucky. When would one of your beneficiaries come to use Gila? When would they find out about you? Would it be before they needed to go to the doctor, or would it be when they needed to go?
Hopefully before. It kind of just depends on marketing. Like I think this would be best spread by people who've used it once successfully and they would tell all their friends. So hopefully it would reach them before they had to go to the doctor. And, you know, at any point is basically fine as long as they know it's an option.
Thank
That's
you.
super interesting. You should look into ZocDoc. Have you heard of ZocDoc?
No, I haven't.
It's just like a app that's used to like find like doctors in the area that like take your insurance. And I used it as like a student in Austin who needed a primary care physician in Austin and didn't know where to go. I used to find my OBGYN and my primary care physician, and it was really great. So I would highly recommend, like, this is like a better, more unique version of ZocDoc. So definitely check that out and maybe look into like how they market and how they have developed a consumer base. So
All right, thanks.
great work.
We'll look into it.
And we are out of time for the slot. So next we are going to have Rohan. The floor is yours.
Is it like in between? Okay, cool. Sorry, 1 second.
No, you're good.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone, my name is Rohan. I'm currently a third-year student at UT studying biology and health and society, and my venture is called Envirolit. So first, I want you to meet Timmy. Timmy is a third grade student who lives with his mom and little brother in Austin, Texas. And fun fact, he loves to play soccer. Now meet Liz. Liz is Timmy's 35-year-old single mom who lives with her two sons, Timmy and his brother, in a rental apartment and works two minimum wage jobs full-time, and her maximum level of education is graduating high school. One day, Timmy shows Liz his arms and explains how it's bothering him. So Timmy and his mom goes to the pediatrician who prescribes him a topical medication for eczema. And then Timmy uses the ointment as prescribed and temporarily feels better. But then after a while, it begins to progress and become worse. So Liz and Timmy go back to the pediatrician and get prescribed a stronger medication. This cycle continues into his teenage years and young adulthood, never figuring out why this happens and what's occurring. So what's missing? The environment. So why does the environment matter to me so much? So growing up, I volunteered in a number of places, and while I was on my journey to get my EMT licensure, I met so many people from different walks of life. And through that time period, I also took a class called Health and Society, where I learned about social determinants of health, including socioeconomic status, neighborhood and built environment, education, healthcare accessibility, and community and social network. This honestly blew my mind, and I reevaluated my whole decision as a medical doctor and pursuing that in the future. And we want to figure out how these micro topics affect healthcare outcomes in some communities. That's why environment can affect race and disproportionately BIPOC people, socioeconomic status, sex. For example, if a female single-parent household is affected versus a male single-parent household, the female single-parent household is most likely to have lower insurance rates and lower insurance in general. Additionally, it affects laws and politics and local legislation and education as well. Now, there's a missing piece over here, and hopefully my venture can fulfill that. So why does environment matter in general? So when outdoors, the exposure to allergens and irritants can trigger acute and chronic healthcare conditions. Now there's a second part of environment as well, the built environment. The built environment includes exposure to certain toxins and contaminants from infrastructure and man-made facilities that can lead to diseases, disorders, and maladies. But essentially, the home is the first measure of safety from surroundings, but when proper measures can't be taken, habitants can develop insane and serious developmental health concerns. And this can lead to neurological issues, lower respiratory infections, eczema, as mentioned before, asthma, cancer, COPD, heart disease, lead poisoning, and so much more. And this by no means is an exhaustive list at all. So why does this affect children? How does it affect children? And why are we studying children? So children have underdeveloped immune systems that lead to developmental delays. And essentially, children are so young, and specifically kindergarten through 5th graders, and that they're unable to point concerns and be advocates for their own health. Hence, they rely on their parent or guardian a lot in order to meet those requirements. As a result, they fail to meet benchmarks of later life success, including relationships, education, proper career growth, and stable socioeconomic status. Now, here are some interesting facts. 20% of children in Texas live in poverty, and 16% of children in Austin remain uninsured. Texas wins once again, being the top state having no insurance for the highest amount of children. And 11.2% of children in Texas remain uninsured as well. And this proportion is disproportionate in the sense that 16 and 11.2% of Texas versus Austin is insanely not comparable. After reviewing some parents who are my beneficiaries, I heard these direct comments. I don't know where to start, I'm confused, I did a lot of research, and I did a lot of try and error. And essentially they felt overwhelmed more than anything else. And why is this happening? So after doing a root cause analysis, I was able to come to these conclusions. So first, there's poor healthcare outcomes among children. And why is that? One of those big factors are the built environment. So where they grow up, live in, go to school in, essentially all those things. And as a result, doctors are only temporarily treating the health concern. As you can see in Timmy's case, the pediatrician did not actually end up treating the main and upstream cause, but rather the downstream cause. And as a result, it kept perpetuating and metastasizing throughout his later life. And as a result, with the lack of proper rhetoric on healthcare, including language and layman's terms, people don't know where to look at and they don't know what they don't know. And as a result, there's no centralized means of learning about solutions because they're so overwhelmed, as seen by the dark quotes before of parents I've interviewed. And that's why healthcare literacy is so important. And healthcare literacy is defined as a capacity to obtain, communicate, process, and understand basic health information to make appropriate health decisions. And this is defined by the CDC. In general, that definition alone is confusing. So imagine understanding the entire concept as a single parent in general, being occupied by cooking, cleaning, and working to make ends meet. That's where Environment comes into play. The Environment's theory of change. Environment is developing an application that allows parents to identify environmental health triggers in elementary school children in the Austin ISD by providing treatments, signs, and symptoms of a diagnosed disease, pro bono, free affordable doctors, and community health workers in order to break the cycle of poor health outcomes in children living in metropolitan urban areas, essentially Austin, Texas. So what Environment does is it can match with local clinics and practices based on child's needs. So this includes allergens and allergists, as well as pediatricians that specialize in a certain case. It also curates suggestions based on selected preferences and housing location. So this can include the age of the child, as well as where they live and what they're doing in those households. It also notices trends based on locality to current ways to mitigate healthcare issues. So this can look at strong transgressors, including asthma or eczema in certain locations. And asthma is really high in Austin because of allergies and seasonal development of healthcare conditions. It also develops educational material on insurance, healthcare based on education level. So education level is not restricted just like college or higher education, but more so just their availability and resources on what they know about environmental healthcare literacy and insurance in general. So why Environment? So Environment aims to cater to the rhetoric and language of the user by having a more layman's term and really breaking things down properly. It also improves early healthcare outcomes in children by identifying the problem earlier on by focusing on the pediatric population. It also introduces affordable and cost-effective healthcare by partnering with healthcare professionals working in pediatrics and also community healthcare workers who can help be the middleman to mitigate those issues. Essentially, it does it by consolidating and centralizing this information, also addressing local environmental concerns as well. So for future direction, I hope to reach out to Austin ISD and continue that discourse and to learn more about what nurses are doing in healthcare settings in order to help mitigate these issues amongst elementary school children, but also receive feedback from parents in similar cities and settings, so including Dallas ISD, which are really similar in terms of population demographics, and talk to healthcare professionals in major hotspots. So this includes Dallas, for example, if we're looking at Texas, but also New York State if we're looking abroad outside of the state as well. Hopefully you could see now how Environment fits the piece and completes the framework for how these intersectional ideas can fulfill the healthcare outcomes of a child in Austin ISD. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, that's so interesting. I know Yasmin has a similar path when it comes to looking at the environmental impact on one's health. So super cool. I'm excited to open it up for questions.
Hey Rohan, interesting, interesting stuff. Tell me about how you plan on working with healthcare providers and community health workers, how they interact with Environment.
Right, for sure. So basically, I've been able to talk to Dr. Michael Hull at Dell Medical School, who essentially has like kind of like a vehicle that helps mitigate healthcare crises amongst pediatric population, but also getting expertise from other healthcare professionals that are not just limited towards physicians in general, but also community healthcare workers who are certified in like nursing or any other healthcare practice. They can help figure out what are those like hotspots and big transgressors within the Austin location, but specifically focusing on elementary school nurses because they have the most interaction outside of parents or guardians in general in Austin, Texas.
Great. And we are out of time. So great question, Yasmin. And right now we can go ahead and move on to our second to last presenter, Ryan Bailey.
Hello, hello. Rohan, that was masterful, by the way. That was great. Also, enjoy my extremely creative slide deck name. So hi, I'm Ryan Bailey. You guys probably all know me at this point, but I'm going to kind of present my research from the Ideator about providing meaningful work for working age people with cancer. Let's see. So, cancer is devastatingly expensive for working class Americans. Out-of-pocket costs for cancer can exceed $20,000 or $20,000, but this is not the whole story of why cancer is so costly. Working class Americans are a relatively new group to experience cancer because cancer is generally most common among pediatric and geriatric patients. Also, one thing that's, I guess, not common for a lot of cancer patients is that they're generally expected to be patients. They're not expected to care for others, they're expected to care for themselves. So it's whenever you have to hold down a job and provide for your family and you don't have people to care for you, that's just a recipe for all of the financial devastation that cancer can cause. And that can culminate in anything from having your career ruined to essentially becoming homeless. So where does this start for me and why does it matter? So this really started when I was reflecting on my grandmother's death from appendiceal cancer. Even though cancer sucked for me, my family, and especially her, we had a lot of advantages going into it. For one, my grandmother had a physician's son-in-law, and very few people have that. She also had several adult children to care for her, and she had a lifetime of savings to her name. These are things that pretty much no adult younger than maybe 50 or 65 will have, and it's honestly a huge advantage. That basically made me realize that a lot of the suffering involved with adults experiencing cancer is unnecessary suffering and could pretty easily be alleviated if there were more resources for the people that were affected. And not to mention that this affects everybody. I'm going to go on to introduce that a ton of people will end up getting cancer in our society, hundreds of thousands. But before that, I basically read nearly a dozen journals, did several beneficiary interviews with people with cancer. I talked to a health sociologist who also had cancer and a clinic manager at Dell Seton. And basically they kind of confirmed for some things what I already knew, but introduced a lot of root causes that I was unfamiliar with. So the first one, and I guess the one that I think a lot of people expect, is that cancer is enormously costly in terms of paying for your treatment, paying for comfort care, things like that. Another thing that's extremely costly is being underinsured. So while the United States has a ton of uninsured people, when it comes to cancer, most people are what's quote unquote called underinsured, which means that even though insurance is covered in their plan, they'll still end up paying thousands and thousands of dollars before they hit their deductible. So insurance really doesn't protect them. Additionally, when I talked to some cancer patients, one of the things they all noted was just how much of a time sink cancer is. They could spend hours or days each week just kind of too exhausted to do anything. And it was just taking up so much of their time that they could not be productive and could not live their normal lives. Finally, and this is well documented, transit is a major, major root cause for cancer. While some cancers certainly don't require that much driving to and from to get treatment, if you get radiation therapy, you will likely drive to the clinic 5 to 7 days a week, every day for maybe 2 months. So that's a huge root cause that basically gives people worse outcomes if you don't own a car or don't have anyone to drive you. Luckily, the American Cancer Society has that one fairly well covered. As for treatment costs and underinsurement, those are fairly recalcitrant to change. So I basically stick with time constraints as my root cause and run with that. So some relevant statistics for kind of to give you a scope on how big this problem is. 725,000 American adults will be diagnosed with cancer this year alone. On average, each of these patients will spend 33 hours a week managing their care. So that could be just being too exhausted to work, or that could be actually planning your treatments or getting in touch with your doctors. At any rate, cancer is a full-time job. Because of all this, because of the time commitment of cancer, 1 in 2 cancer patients lose their job, which is mind-boggling to me. Not to mention that, in addition to losing your job, you're paying all these out-of-pocket costs, to boot. So in my beneficiary research, I realized 3 core beneficiary needs that if I wanted to make an actual solution, I would have to hit on these. First, patients need work. If they lose their job, or cancer is just generally too expensive for most people to stop working, to stop having like a household income. In addition to that, they need work that can be done on a dynamic schedule. 9 to 5s don't make sense when you might spend the whole day in your bed because you're too exhausted to get up. Many adults derive intense value from their ability to provide for others. So finally, the work that they need or that they do needs to be purposeful. They need to be able to feel that they can provide this for others. Cancer obliterates your ability to provide for others and forces you into a sick role and makes you feel like a burden. Thus, if I'm going to make a solution, it's going to need to give people a sense of purpose. My hypothesized solution is to hire newly diagnosed patients to coordinate the care of other cancer patients. To me, this is effective for several reasons. I believe this will address the root cause of time constraints as well as the problem as a whole by empowering patients to solve their own financial problems themselves. This gives people an incentive to work with me, kind of allowing yourself to fix your own problems rather than having someone come in and fix them for you. Care coordination tends to lend itself well to project-based work. That way, if you're incapacitated because of your treatment or need to skip work because of your treatment, you can just not work that day and come back when you're feeling okay and continue your work and continue making income. Finally, it provides really purposeful, high-impact work that allows people to give back. Most cancer patients, after having cancer, often reflect and feel that they wish they could give back to the cancer community. They wish they could do more. This provides them a way to do that after the fact, but also allows them to continue to bring income into their family while they're being treated. Not to mention, you don't need to be trained as much for this. Whenever I was thinking of other possible things I could have patients do, I was struggling a lot to figure out what people could be trained to do in a relatively short amount of time. This harnesses patients' expertise over coordinating their own care and allows them to deploy that with other people. So as for my next steps, while I've talked to a couple people about about this idea and talked to some pretty badass individuals in the cancer field, I'd love to hear more about whether this is really needed or not. So I need to do quite a bit more market validation. I would love to see what people say about this idea. In addition, Well, I think I have an idea of how I want to generate revenue from this. It makes sense that you could charge somebody for having their cancer care coordinated. I would love to figure out how ethical this is and how sustainable this is. Finally, the channels I've been using to get or to talk to beneficiaries and get their feedback are just generally interpersonal, finding them through word of mouth, finding them on Facebook groups and whatnot. And while this has been effective so far, it definitely is not super scalable. So I'd love to validate the channels I'm reaching out to beneficiaries through. In addition, before I end my presentation, I'm reaching time, I just want to talk about the intersectionality of my issue. So the cost of cancer care kind of connects to everything. And I'm really proud of this plot, by the way. I really like this plot. I connected it to a lot of other issues, and I used the UN Sustainable Growth Goals for this. So obviously, cancer ties in very closely with healthcare, but also in the way that I'm approaching my solution, it also ties into providing people decent work and kind of providing a way for the economy to grow. So this keeps people involved in economic growth. And while I haven't really talked about how inequality maps onto cancer, it super does. It's true that insurance doesn't protect you from the cost of cancer, but it certainly helps. So by doing this and helping to provide work to cancer patients, you can hope that this will reduce the inequalities in some way. Finally, for that transit option, or for the transit root cause, that's quite a bit of driving. So that can be have pretty radical effects on the climate as well. So that's why I've listed it here. All right, that's all I have. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ryan. We do not have time for questions. We're gonna go right to Samin, but I will say for anyone who has questions or comments in the feedback form that'll be in the main room at the end, you can send them there. And also, Ryan, you should consider reaching out to Texas 4000. I'm sure they would be more than happy to talk to you and be interviewed by you. So, especially people on the current team. So, it'd be great. Samin, you are up.
Okay, so have any of you ever felt like there's a vast universe of resources out there, more than the human mind can comprehend, but you have no idea how to utilize them? This is commonly the case for many people in the United States when they think about our healthcare system. Hi, my name is Samin Rahman, and my cell venture, Mustang Health, gives people the power to prioritize and use healthcare resources when they need it. The social challenge that I'm aiming to combat is low health literacy in low-income communities, specifically for families living in Irving ISD, which is my hometown. Health literacy is defined as the degree to which individuals have the capacity to obtain, understand, and use basic health information to make well-informed health decisions. I want to address this social challenge because I have a lot of experience working in healthcare. I volunteered at children's hospitals, interned at UT Southwestern, and I saw how costs, insurance, and a lack of understanding about how to navigate the healthcare system was a large barrier for people seeking preventive care and treatment. And I wanted to combat this in my hometown of Irving. So as I was doing my root cause analysis, I had to ask a very broad overarching question. Why is the generational cycle of poverty so pervasive? After going through and identifying low health literacy as my main challenge, I found that lack of health education, language barriers, and food insecurity were the three main causes, with the root cause being a lack of time and incentives to seek out and act upon available resources. So as I was conducting research from academic journals and beneficiary interviews, three key components were discovered: the difficulties that arise from low health literacy, the significance of health literacy, and strategic health communication. For people with low health literacy, there are a lot of difficulties in navigating the healthcare system, including locating providers and services and seeking preventive healthcare, filling out health forms, knowing the connection between risky behavior and health conditions, and managing chronic health conditions and understanding medicine directions. Regarding the significance of healthcare, education, income, and English proficiency are all contributing factors, but health literacy has been proven to be the best predictor of health outcomes. And furthermore, free clinics run off donations and have a very limited amount of resources. So when beneficiaries have a higher health literacy, this actually improves the clinic's capabilities and potential to create impact with those limited resources. Third, health education messages must be adapted to meet the unique needs and communication orientations of the specific audiences. Redundancy and reinforcement are the most important components of a strategic health message. Also, channels have to be directed towards a target population. For example, a website is not going to be helpful to a population that lacks internet access. And finally, these channels need to be culturally tailored to remove stigma that is in place in a lot of different communities regarding healthcare. So after doing this research, I thought at first that I wanted to create a health education curriculum for students. However, after talking with beneficiaries, I found that the barrier to this kind of school health education curriculum is that there are a lot of requirements already in place because of the TEKS, the Texas Education Standards, the emphasis on AP or IB courses, dual enrollment, standardized testing. So I decided to pivot. I thought I wanted to do a health education curriculum for parents. However, I found that food insecurity is very pervasive throughout the community, and a lot of parents know about available resources but don't utilize them because they're so busy working or taking care of children to ensure that food is being put on the table. There is actually a nonprofit in Irving called the Irving Schools Foundation, where they have a Food for Thought initiative, where they pack about 1,200 bags per week and distribute them at local community centers to children to last the weekend. So seeing that parents don't have necessarily the time or the incentive to learn to utilize healthcare resources, I wanted to create that incentive system using the tenets of strategic health communication. And this led me to the question, how might we motivate parents of low-income students in Irving ISD to seek out and act upon healthcare resource information and resources? While addressing this question, we would also be keeping in mind challenges such as food insecurity and lack of internet access that are prevalent throughout the community. Therefore, my venture is Mustang Health. Mustang Health, there are two components that comprise Mustang Health. The first is developing a comprehensive list of resources and partnering with the Irving Schools Foundation and their Food for Thought initiative, as well as free clinics that are located throughout Irving. A lot of these clinics are religiously affiliated, and the Irving Schools Foundation has been looking to partner with religious institutions to improve their impact. Instead of distributing food at different community centers, food would be distributed at clinics throughout Irving at locations that are still convenient for the beneficiaries. With the food packages, there would also be visual pamphlets and labels on them with numbers, phone numbers, addresses of clinics, resource hotlines, and websites for available health information. The second step is actually with the religious institutions themselves. Because a lot of these clinics are affiliated with religious institutions, advertising the clinics at those religious institutions would be incredibly useful because it would be coming from a very safe and trustworthy source. It would be very important to have a streamlined message that explains why learning about the healthcare system is important for people and their families' livelihoods. It's culturally tailored because a lot of different religious institutions throughout Irving ISD are are either ethnic centric or nationality centric. And so being able to have that culturally tailored message coming from a trustworthy source is something that is not found in any other initiative. At the religious institutions, they would also promote digital literacy, where people can find websites for general healthcare and insurance information using computers that are already present at those institutions, donated by the community members or donated by the library. And finally, having some sort of teenage youth group would, in charge of learning the basic health education curriculum, would allow them to eventually teach their parents or younger siblings to create a generational knowledge transfer to improve health literacy. Over time, constant clinic visits and advertisements of the resources that are available. So why will this be effective? Essentially, Mustang Health is not that much different than the current state of things. The biggest difference is the location change and the increase of incentive. We want to make it so easy for people to say yes that they can't say no, so that we can reach these 4 goals. Overall, Mustang Health is strategically poised to motivate people to take advantage of the resources that are available so that they can improve health outcomes and advocate for themselves medically. Thank you.
Great job. Way to end on a high note. I feel like we haven't left a high note the entire time. So everything has been just so